Hi, No Place Left Army Network, and anyone else watching this video. Just wanted to share with you a way to share the gospel through what we call the two kingdoms illustration. Usually when I try to share with people, I'll start out with what God's done in my life, my story, and at the end of that conversation, I always ask the question, have you ever made Jesus king of your life? Most people will end up saying no, and then I just ask, has anyone ever shared the gospel with you or the good news of Jesus with you? If they say yes, then I ask them to share with me, and usually they'll say, well, why don't you share it? If they say no, then I just go right into it and say, well, what I've come to realize is that there's two kingdoms. There's the kingdom of darkness and the kingdom of God. We see the kingdom of darkness around us in this world, right? We see the disease, the depression, suicide, the hurt, broken relationships. And we see this world is broken because of this kingdom of darkness. But the most important thing to know about a kingdom is the king. And the king of the kingdom of darkness is Satan, and he's a liar. He tells us we can rule our own life and we'll be happy and we'll have true life. But the reality is it just leads us to hurt and brokenness and sadness. And so we try to get out. We try to get out through making a lot of money or having a lot of things. Or maybe we try to get out by medicating ourselves through sex and alcohol and drugs. Or some people try to get out through going to church or being a good person. But the reality is if we're still king of ourselves, these things will slingshot us right back into brokenness. On the other hand, you got the kingdom of God. And we see that kingdom around us too. We see love. We see beauty. We see God's creation. And the king of the kingdom of God is Jesus. And he is the creator of that love. He actually is love. And he loves us so incredibly that he came down to this broken world and lived the life that we live in a human body, and then died on a cross and was broken for us so that we could be forgiven. And then he rose 3 days later to give us true life and prove that he was king over everything. And all he asks is that we turn from being king of ourselves and allow him to be king by believing in who he really is. So I'd love to ask you, which king do you serve? Do you serve yourself or do you serve Jesus? So another question to ask is, which kingdom are you living in? And that's a great question to ask as well. And usually my follow-on question is, well, what would keep you from making Jesus your king? When they say that Jesus isn't their king, or they say they're in the kingdom of darkness, I say, what would keep you from making Jesus your king? So would love to also just help you to be able to train people very simply. Once you start out with, hey, what I've come to realize is there's two kingdoms, then all you have to remember is that you just describe what the kingdom is like, okay? Like disease, depression, suicide, hurt, broken relationships for the kingdom of darkness. Then you just describe what the king is like, so Satan, he's a liar. And then you describe what the king does. He tells us we can rule our life, and we end up trying to get out, but slingshots us right back in. It's part of his lie. So then you go over to the kingdom of God. You describe what the kingdom is like. It's full of love and beauty and creation. We see that around us. And then you describe what the king is like. Jesus, he is love. And he loves us so much that he did this. So what the king does is the next thing. And then you always got to remember to end with that question. So just remember what the kingdom is like. Describe that, what the king is like, and then what the king does. All right, I hope this is helpful, and I pray that God uses this for his glory. So happy fishing.